Okay. So let's hear. Who had, you tell me who had the strangest favorite TV show? Who had the strangest? Somebody tell me who they think had the strangest TV show at their table. Did you guys talk about TV shows? So did anybody have a really weird one? Okay, one person raise your hand. Okay, right here. Yeah, Gunsmoke. I used to watch that as a little girl. I love that. I know. Somebody else. Anybody else? Okay, in the back, Shelley. What? Oh, the prodigal son. No, that one. Oh, Murder and Mayhem. Okay, I like Murder and Mayhem. Okay, well, how many of you guys, I was having a conversation right before Sweet Steph started. How many of you guys have just felt like crazy out of the box things like microphones not working and you just like had to stop and think, do I even really want to go tonight? I mean, let's be honest, because we're like all transparent here. I want to tell you that this study, while we are here and we're fellowshipping and we're diving deeper into the word and we're having a great time, that's not why that stuff is happening. That stuff is happening because you guys are diving into the word every single day. And you're spending time with God and you're growing and you're learning. And there are times when there are crazy forces in this world that will want to sort of derail you. And they can use the simplest things like microphones not working. So let me just encourage you, keep at it. Just keep at it. Just keep doing your study every day and just do what you can. And we're about third week in, and there are empty seats because people start getting behind. And when they start getting behind, they stop trying. Don't do that. And so this week, I pray every day through the list of you who are here, because I want you to just, if you're behind, just keep going. Just keep going, but do it for the right. We're going to talk tonight a lot about motive. And somebody said that, you know, check in your motive for fighting. We talked about that today. What's your motive? And tonight we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of dive into the idea of we can't do what we don't believe. And if we're trying to do something that we don't believe, we're going to hit a brick wall every time. I call it the speed bumps of life. It's just going to happen because you cannot maintain, you cannot keep doing what you don't believe. And so let me open us with a word of prayer, and then we're going to dive into to what I want to just kind of focus us in on tonight before we break up into before we do our table time. So let me pray. God, I know that you are here because your spirit lives inside of each one of us who have a personal relationship with you through Jesus. And God, I also know that your spirit is here in this room because we are seeking you, we're asking you to speak to us. And so God, just for the next few minutes, I pray hedge of protection around this room, that we won't have microphone issues, that we won't have distractions, that we will be able to just laser focus in to you, to your word. God, I pray that I would become totally and completely invisible, because my only desire right now and from this moment on until I step off the stage is that you would be glorified and that my words would be your words, and that I would point everyone in this room to you. So God, guide and direct us, help us to listen, help me to hear from you and to share what I feel like you've asked me to share. And God, I thank you. I thank you for what you do in my life every single day and how you just keep showing up. And I love you for that. And I love you that every one of these women is here because they want to hear from you tonight. So speak to them. We ask all of this in your precious son's name, amen. So this week, we focused really on, can you believe we're over halfway through? We literally, if you look at the date and we were, the last video will be posted on July 31st. And then you'll have a couple of days and we'll come back on August 4th for our final time together. We're almost done. It's kind of bittersweet. I love hearing from you guys during the week, and I love that we come together and we get to just dive into his word. And I love the things that you're sharing with me that God is doing in your own life, because he's at work. He's at work. And so if you haven't shared with me or Steph something that he's doing, or maybe a question of, what does that mean? What is he doing? So I'm going to share with you tonight as we look at the last 7 days worth of reading, and we're going to talk through James 2:20 through 4:3. And we're not going to read it, but I'm going to just kind of take these days and I'm going to share with you some of the things that God just really brought out in my quiet time. Some of it I said in the video, some of it's just extra stuff. So we started out on day 15 in James 2 and 4 verses. And there was something that I pulled out. There's a story that pulled out of these first days, which really described to me how faith and works are seen in our lives. And when you go into your own discussion time, you're going to talk deeper about this. But this is how I really just sort of laser focused in on a particular story that comes out of these passages. And it comes right at the very beginning when it says, I love how God says senseless person. And in the video we talked this week about what does it mean to be a senseless person? It's a person without sense. Okay, so he's really sort of going after these Jewish Christians, and he's like, it's almost like he's saying in California surf language, dude, like, what are you thinking? These people, I'm sure that I just can imagine him just having these conversations and going, oh my gosh, because he said, senseless person, are you willing to learn that faith without works is useless? Because what he's trying to get them to see is that we're not saved by our works, but because we are saved, we're going to do works. Does that make sense? And he brings up the story of Abraham and Isaac, and he says, wasn't Abraham our father justified by works in offering Isaac? So I want to talk for a second about this story, because there may be somebody in the room who doesn't know what the story, what even the importance of the story. Anybody in here not know who Abraham is? Be brave. Anybody? Everybody knows? Everybody knows who Abraham is? Everybody knows the story of Abraham and Isaac? Cool. That's the first. Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to still talk about it. So why? Because I think this is the perfect picture. And when James is saying here, wasn't he justified? Does anybody remember from the lesson this week what the word justified means? Does anybody remember? Justified means what? Somebody yelled it out, I heard it. It means to demonstrate or prove what you believe. It's a word that means, it's a spiritual word that you're going to hear a lot of times. You'll hear the word justified, you'll hear sanctification. Justified is what happens to us when we come to Jesus and we accept him as our personal savior. It's what happens when Jesus takes our sin, and how God sees us from that point on. And James is saying here, wasn't our father Abraham justified by works in offering Isaac his son on the altar? Well, I don't think that Abraham, when he put Isaac on that altar, I don't think that he was trying to get into heaven by doing something. And I think the confusion happens when you and I start trying to do our way into heaven. I serve at church. I work in the nursery. What do we do? I read my Bible every day. We start checking off the boxes. But I think that James wants to pull this out because he's trying to tell these Jewish Christians, and what I think we need to learn is that it's a relationship with God It was Abraham's relationship with God that gave him the courage to trust God when what God was asking him to do didn't make sense. Think about that for a second. If God has never asked you to do something that doesn't make sense, I promise there's going to be a day that will come when it will happen. I mean, I'm living right now. My life right now doesn't make sense. And I'm continually asking God, really, God? I had a conversation this week with someone who said, I didn't sign up for this. They're in the same circumstances that I am. And what's interesting is, when I say that to God, I know that's when I'm starting to spiral. Because the truth is, I did sign up for it. And when we look at Abraham, when God said to Abraham, okay, this is the son you've waited for your entire life. I mean, Abraham had his son when he was too old to have kids. And his wife was too old to have kids. And he had been waiting. He had actually tried to take things into God. You know, we know the story, how he tried to take matters into his own hands. Let's check our motive there. God, you're taking too long, so I'm going to go solve the problem. And what he did was he created a people group that to this day still give the Jewish people trouble. You can trace a lot of the trouble in the Middle East back to these people groups. And so when he has this beloved son, and the son is old enough to understand what's going on, and they take their donkey and their firewood and they go to the mountain for a sacrifice, the son even says to his dad at one point, wait, what are we missing here? And what does Abraham say to the son? God will provide. And I believe that Abraham at that moment really believed God would provide, but he didn't know the answer of how it would happen. And do you know how we know that? Because he literally tied his son to the altar, waiting for God to say, okay, stop, okay, stop, okay, stop. I mean, get this picture. I'm a creative person who loves pictures. Think about this for a second. He didn't just stand there going, okay, God, here we are. How are you going to fix this problem? He literally built the fire, put the fire all together, didn't light it, put the sun there. He's raising the knife. And in the 11th hour and 59 minutes and 59 seconds, God stops him. The action that Abraham did was not what saved him, or actually, if we were looking at this from the perspective of being saved, it's not what saved him. It was the relationship with God that gave him the courage to do what God was asking him to do. So when we talk about faith and works and how they're seen in our lives, this is one of those issues that I think we've always struggled with, and I think we're going to continue to struggle with it. Why? Because we as humans want to start taking things into our own hands if we don't like what God's answer is, or we don't think God's acting fast enough. And I have been guilty of this. Why? Because I know that if I could get my husband to do X, Y, Z, and I have a whole list of things, and even today, God and I are having a fight about this. If he would just do this, God, this would not be a problem. And then God's like, yeah, but you can't fix that. You can't make that happen. And I'm like, well, why aren't you fixing it? That's what I did. Well, why aren't you fixing it? I'm not even going to wait for you anymore. I'm going to just take care of this, and I'm going to make a phone call, and I'm going to fix it. It never works out when I do that. It just doesn't. Why? Because I have to check my motive. So we're going to talk, you guys are going to talk for a little while, about what it looks like to describe faith and works and how they're seen in our lives. And I see them as a circle, almost like you can't really distinguish them from each other. Because it's kind of like, what came first, the chicken or the eggs? Well, we know then in our circumstances, it's the relationship with God that comes first, and then our actions. So the next day, on day 16, I love this day because this is the day where I asked you the question. And some of you sitting in this room are actually sitting here feeling this way. I don't know you personally, and nobody is literally in my mind, but I know in a group this size. Have you ever told yourself it's no use? I'm too what? I did this, I did that, I'm not this, I'm not that. So God can't love me, forgive me, or use me. If we were honest, I know that there's got to be people in this room that feel that way. I lived my life that way for a very, very long time. And then one day, my granddaughter Kinsley, when she was about 4 years old, took me on a walk. And while we were on that walk, she stopped. And she turned around and she grabbed my hand and she started walking backwards. So we are awkwardly walking down the sidewalk. I'm walking forward, she's holding onto my hand. She's walking backward, but she's moving forward. And then at one point I dropped her hand and she yelled at me and she's like, no, grab my hand. You have to, she grabbed my hand if I'm gonna fall. And so finally I just stopped and I said, what are you doing? What's going on in that little 4-year-old mind there? 4 years old. She said, I want to see where I've been. She wanted to see where she had been. So in her 4-year-old mind, if she held my hand and we were walking along, she was going to get to see where she'd been. And then she said to me, you have to hold my hand because they can't see where I'm going. And if I'm not holding your hand, I'm going to fall down because they can't see where I'm going. And so finally she turned around and we went on our walk. The next morning I was sitting in my home office and I was getting ready to write a blog. And I was doing my quiet time. I have coffee with God every morning. We just have coffee together. I just imagine that. And all of a sudden I realized that there was a lesson for me in her word. Because I was still trying to move forward in my life, but I was doing it like this. And in some ways, I was literally trying to live forward, but I was so focused on the past that I was stuck. And I got this picture of that God saying to me, we've already dealt with that. It's not going to change. It's not going to go away. But how can we forgive? How can we accept? How can we understand? And that morning, a little hummingbird kind of flew up to the window where the feeder was, because I would feed the hummingbirds outside my window, and they knew that I would sit in there. And so it just kind of became the thing. We lived in the house for 4 years, and I had the same hummingbirds. I fed them so much they didn't actually leave. They're supposed to like migrate, but they never did, because I had food out there for them all year round. And this one bright red hummingbird with a green head, his head was all green and his whole other body was red. He would fly up to the window every morning. And God, I started having this feeling, and God said to me, if you didn't feed him, he would have gone with his buddies to South America or wherever they're supposed to go. But you feed them so he stays here. And while you think that you're doing him a favor by giving him food, he's making a mistake because he's not living the life that I've created this hummingbird to live. He's missing out on something because he's so focused on what is going on. And he goes, you're Carol. And then I'm like, okay, when did we stop talking about the hummingbird? Because then he like turned the conversation to me. I'm like, let's go back to the hummingbird. And God's like, no. When are you going to stop living in the past with all of the regrets or the I should haves or I could haves or I would haves or I need to or I wish I had? When are you going to stop living in the past? And when are you going to act like I'm here with you in the present? And you're going to start living the life that I want you to live. So I went to a friend of mine who is a veterinarian, and I said, am I hurting my hummingbird? God told me I was hurting my hummingbird. Can you imagine this? Fortunately, he's a member of my church. God told me I was hurting my hummingbird because I feed them all year round. He goes, well, technically you should take the feeder down during this time, so that they'll migrate, because sometimes hummingbirds are lazy. And you have, obviously you have a lazy hummingbird, but here's the problem. You've already ruined his, yeah. So if you take it down, he's not gonna have anything to eat, so just keep it up. I'm not going to ruin this hummingbird's life. He's like, it's not that dramatic. How long had I? Was not that long ago. Let's see, Kinsley is 12 now, so she was 4, so do the math. How long had I been living like that? And we get so tripped up. And I think what James is trying to say here is he pulls out, these people were Jewish Christians, so they had the Old Testament written down. They knew the law, they knew the stories. And so when James is telling them, hey, remember Rahab, the prostitute? Do you remember what happened to her? That's what James is saying to them. Look at this scripture. Look at Rahab. Look at how she married Boaz. Look at who their son was, and then Rahab married Salmon, and they had Boaz, and Boaz marries Ruth. And he goes down this genealogy of who Jesus is. And I think we forget sometimes that Jesus' family, even though he's the Son of God, his mother Mary was a human. There is a genealogy that goes with Christ, and God wanted us to know that it's not the perfect people that were his parents. I mean, his great-great-great-grandfather was a murderer. He was an adulterer, and then he murdered the guy to cover it up. And God wants us to understand that if we have ever told ourselves it's no use, I'm too whatever, fill in the blanks, it's not true. Sometimes we let our health get in the way. I mean, we can find, I've done so many excuses. I've found so many reasons not to what. And so I really want you to think about that. Are you living today that your eyes are so focused back here that you don't see what's going on around you? And that day on the sidewalk, we lived in that house for a couple more years, and I never walked that loop again without getting to that place in the sidewalk and going, wow. And some of you might be living that way, and I challenge you, don't walk out of this room tonight looking forward. Look forward, look out, look right here. So day 19, he comes back to the tongue. Why does James keep hidden? Why does he just keep going back to the tongue? He just goes back to the tongue again. And I love this because the tongue creates so much drama. I love that you guys kind of giggled. I mean, if we were honest, let's just do a full-on belly laugh here, because the tongue creates, somebody said tonight that it can destroy or it can build up, and that's the truth. It can destroy or build up. And I love the picture that he gives us, because he goes, James 3:7-12, he dives right in and he says, every kind of animal, bird, reptile, and fish can be tamed. But can they ever really be tamed? Isn't there a natural tendency inside of them? There's things, while we can domesticate them, we can train them. Are they ever really tamed? I don't think so. Because we have a couple of dogs that refuse, in our household, that refuse to be trained. I don't know why they just don't want to. I don't know. I'm not a dog person, so I feed them when Kate's gone. I'm nice to them. But I'm like, go lay on the bed, go, don't touch me. I'm just not a dog person. I don't know why. I've just never been a dog person, but I watch these dogs and I watch my cat. And then I feed the turtle right now because they're out of town. So every morning I go up and I feed the turtle. And this turtle, they've had it for a few years, and it's a her, I think it's a her. Her name is Cheeto. They tell me it's a her. I'm still trying to figure out how they know it's a her. How do you tell what a turtle? But I noticed this time something interesting, because when they're gone, I did this one time a few months ago, and I said to my grandson Tyson, what can I do for the turtle that will make the turtle feel special? Like, he's gonna know. He's like, well, she likes watermelon. I'm like, okay, I'll go buy some watermelon. So I went to the store and I bought a little watermelon and I cut it up, and every day I would take lettuce and watermelon and I would lay it on the rock for the turtle. And the turtle, did you know they are fast? They are really fast. This little turtle would like scamper very quickly, and he has a 6 foot by 6 foot wooden box with no top that this turtle lives in his room. And this turtle would hear me coming and she would run. Well, this time I noticed the turtle's gotten bigger, a little bit bigger. But this time she's sitting, in the morning, she's sitting on the rock waiting for me. Like, she heard Mama's coming. There's gonna be watermelon. And what was interesting is the very first morning when I walk up, I start talking to her when I hit the landing at the top of the stairs. Cheeto, Mama's here. Oh my gosh, can you believe that I did? And so I walk in there and she's sitting on the rock, and I put her lettuce out and I lay out the watermelon, and I expect her to dive right in. Every single day since I started doing this, she crawls over to the edge of the box and she cranes her little turtleneck up like this, and she looks at me. And I'm like, what? What is going on here? And then she'll sit there and she'll look at me. So the first day I kind of leaned down. I'm like, are you allowed to touch? I don't know. So I kind of like thinking, well, she's probably got sensitive. So I started petting her shell. And she didn't put her head away. She just kind of sat there. And then slowly she turned around and she started to eat. And so the first morning when that happened, I went back and I was sitting in my room, and I had already done my quiet time. And all of a sudden I started thinking, that's how God wants me to look at him. The way that turtle looked at me that morning, that's how God wants me to look at him. I don't really know what the turtle was thinking, so I'm kind of going right outside the box here, but I know that she did not just naturally go to the food and start eating. She literally, and every morning she's done the same thing. And I think, how many times do I forget that that's how God wants me to look at him? He doesn't want me to just dive into whatever he provides. He wants me to look at him and say, thank you, maybe. I don't know. Thanks for the watermelon. I don't know. I wish you could talk. It'd be kind of fun. I mean, I don't know. But I think that when we talk about the tongue, sometimes we're all guilty of this. When we're tired, when we're hungry, when we haven't had enough sleep. I just want you to know that this is like an hour and 15 minutes past my bedtime. Because I go to bed like early, because I get up like early. There's somebody else in here. Is it Stephanie? Yeah, Stephanie. Stephanie and I text sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning because she's awake and I'm awake. Sure, Sherry's another one. Yeah, we text because I'm awake, they're awake. But you know, like now I'm tired. So hang in there, girl. Hang in there, girl. We're gonna get through this. Tired. Have you ever like said something and wish you could just like take it back? Have you ever said something that you meant to be a fiery dart of pain to the receiver? The tongue can do so much damage. And I love the picture that James gives us about there's only one tongue tamer. There's a lion tamer, there's a tongue tamer, and there's only one tongue tamer. And it's not us. It's our relationship with God. And then we get to day 20. And we start diving into the end of James chapter 3. And James just really starts out, who among you is wise and understanding by his good conduct? He should show that works are done, and just he starts talking about people seeing who we believe in by what we do. So I can't make this stuff up, girls. In April, my computer crashed, and I depend on my computer for everything, for work, for ministry. Fortunately, I had everything backed up because my whole manuscript, I mean, the publisher has it, but even my manuscript and all of my notes were on this computer. So I needed to get a new computer. So COVID, you can't just go to the Apple store, you have to order it online and have it delivered. So I knew what I wanted, so I went online and I ordered the computer. I ordered the computer and some cords and then a case for it. And they said, okay, well, it'll be delivered, it'll be shipped overnight for free, and it'll show up at your house tomorrow. So the next day, a Uber driver, or what is it? No, it's the, who delivers the, no, not FedEx, it was DoorDash. It was a DoorDash. I hear the ring doorbell. I'm expecting it. I'm tracking the driver. It says, Apple says your driver is on its way. And I'm watching it on my computer and my doorbell says somebody's at your door. So I walk out and there is a very scary looking guy getting out of a very scary looking car with a little tiny bag, like little tiny bag. And he walks up and he hands it to me and it has the Apple insignia on the bag. Now, I know immediately there is no computer in that bag. And so I say to the guy, where's the rest of my order? We're talking like a lot of money here, where, and the expensive part is missing. And he goes, I don't know, that's all I have. And I was like, my heart sinks because I'm like, oh my gosh. Apple just told me it's coming to my door. It's not here. So the guy says, nah, this is all I got. He gets in his car and he drives away. And I'm like, did he take the computer? I'm standing in my driveway going, did he take the computer? And so I walk in just as Apple sends me a text message and says, congratulations, your computer has been delivered. I'm literally freaking out. Because then I go online and they've already charged me for it. And I'm sitting here going, what do I do? Who do I call? I can't go to this. What do I do? I don't even know. So I go online, I pull up the invoice. There's a button that says have a problem. Click here. Next thing you know, I'm chatting with somebody. I say my computer is not here. Well, it said it is. No, it's not. The DoorDash guy didn't bring it. Did he take it? And the guy's like, that's okay. We'll overnight you another one. Yeah, but what happened to the first? And so they're like, no, we'll do it and we'll figure it out. We're chatting. So he convinces me. I get another invoice in the mail with a 0 on it. And they say, here's the tracking number. It'll be here tomorrow. Next day, a special delivery. I've never even heard of this, but a very official, special delivery guy shows up at my house and delivers a computer to my house. About the time I get in and I'm looking at this computer and I go and I start setting it up and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to figure it out. They're going to work it all out. I get a phone call from the manager of the Apple store in Valley Plaza Mall. Oh, your computer, it's sitting here on the counter. We're going to send it to you now. I'm like, no, it's fine. He's like, okay, well, I had done some special financing for it. So he's like, that's okay, I'll just return this one, you keep that one. I'm like, okay. Next thing I know, like, text message, thank you for returning your computer. We're canceling your special whatever, interest-free, whatever. And I'm sitting here going, how am I gonna pay for this one? And then all of a sudden I'm like, nobody even knows I have this one. Oh, this is bad. So I call Keith, because we're now on a first name basis at the Apple Store. And I say, Keith, I got a problem. Now this computer has already been set up. All my stuff has been transferred. And I said to Keith, there's a problem. And he's like, I know. And I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, well, just bring everything here and we'll figure it out. I'm like, okay. So I get down there and he's like, well, we have a problem. He's like, yeah. He's like, he goes, I can't believe you brought this in because nobody even knows you have it. I'm like, I know, but it's not mine. I didn't pay for it. And I'm not going to keep something I didn't pay for. And he's like, are you kidding me? There's nobody on the planet that's going to do that. And I also, hopefully there is a bunch of people at Valley Baptist Church that would do that. He's like, okay, so he's like, I got bad news. We got to return it all and start over. And I'm like, well, can I buy the computer I've already set up again? And he said, no. I said, well, can you wipe it clean? Yes. But I can't buy it? No. We finally got it worked out and I walked out with the computer. I had to reset it all up again, but as I was walking out, his words hit me. I can't believe you returned something that nobody knew you had. And this whole study of James, I had done it before, but I started thinking about, yeah, what we do. I had made an impression on not just one of the managers, but the assistant manager and 2 of the clerks, because they're all like, nobody would know you had this. And I said, I know, doesn't make any sense. Well, I guess I didn't learn my lesson, or I guess there was another lesson to be learned. Because here we are, it's July, and last Friday, I can't make this up. Last Friday, I'm sitting in my living room and my husband walks in and says, oh, you got a box. And I'm like, oh, great. He goes, he's used to me getting boxes. So I walked into my office and I just put it on the desk and then I walked back out and I went, I didn't order anything. So I walked back in and I opened the box and the box is addressed to me, my name, my address. And I open it up and there's all this bubble wrap. And as I start digging through the bubble wrap, there is a very expensive iPad, a $250 set of earphones, and a bunch of cords. And I'm like, I had no invoice, no paperwork at all. So I look on the front of it, it's come from some sort of an Apple warehouse, something in San Bernardino. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I waited until Monday morning and I called Keith. And I said, Keith, he said, Carol. I said, he goes, what? You got another problem? And I go, I don't know if you're gonna believe this one. I go, I got a box on Friday and it had, and I told him what was in it. He goes, I can't help you with that one. He goes, I can't help you with that one. He goes, you gotta call the Apple. I 1-800 I care about Apple number and you tell them. I'm like, okay. And he goes, if that doesn't work, bring it in and he goes, we'll figure it out. And I go, this is the thing, Keith, I didn't order it. He goes, well, did you order something else? No, I didn't order anything. He goes, there's no invoice, no. So I call Apple. The tracking number doesn't exist. The serial numbers do not exist. They do know the address of where it came from, but they don't even have anything in their system as to where it was shipped from. And they go, basically, this doesn't exist. And I go, well, I'm looking at it. It doesn't. They're like, well, we don't know what to do. I talked to 3 managers on the phone. They're like, we don't know what to tell you. This has never happened before. I'm like, I sit there and I'm staring at this box. That's probably, I actually Googled it because I wanted to know how much the iPad cost. Because it was the full service, it had all the Wi-Fi, and I mean, it was the most expensive iPad they have right now. And so I put it on the box and I drove to the Apple store. And when I walked in, Keith happened to be standing there with 2 of the clerks that I had seen back in April. And I opened the door and they're like, they're like, Keith goes, this is bad. I'm like, no, it's not bad because this is not my problem. And I handed him the box and he goes, I got to see this. And so I opened up the box and he goes, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, yeah, but it's your problem now, not mine. And he goes, what did they say? And I say, it doesn't exist. The tracking number, the serial number, it doesn't exist. And he goes, what am I going to do with it? And I said, well, they told me that if I really didn't want to keep it, to just bring it to the Apple store. So here I am, it's yours. And I turned around and walked out. I turned back and he was just standing there shaking. They were all standing there shaking their heads. And he's like, nobody knows you. And I go, oh, no. And he's like, wow. So why just do things like that happen to us? Well, I don't know why that happened, but think about this. People are watching what we do. I'm never going to walk into that Apple store again without them going, hey, that's the lady that doesn't keep stuff that doesn't belong to her. But here's what I asked myself. When they didn't send me the computer that I paid for, what did I do? I fought tooth and nail until I got what I had paid for. If I get something that I didn't pay for, why would I not fight just as hard to make it right? It's the motive inside of our hearts. It's the motive. It's the things that drive us. And that is what James is trying to tell us. And the final day, on day 21, hits me every time. Guys, this is the hardest. These first 3 verses in James 4, they get me every single time I read this book. James 4, 1 through 3, and I am going to read these to you. What is the source of wars and fights? Don't they come from your passions that wage a war within you? You desire and you do not have, so you murder, and you covet, you cannot obtain, so you fight and you wage wars. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask with what? The wrong motive. The wrong motivation. So that you may spend it on your pleasures. When I start reading this scripture, I realize every single war has a beginning. Whether it's a war between a mother and a 3-year-old, and I don't know, is there anybody who has 3-year-olds? Doesn't it feel like a war sometimes? Every day. My daughter-in-law has 4 little kids. I have been in her house and they do not want to do what she's telling them to do. And it is like a war zone sometimes. The screaming, the yelling, he throws things. Fortunately, they discipline really well. But there's always a source of every fight, of every disagreement, of every argument. Sometimes we cause them because we're so focused on getting our own way. And sometimes somebody else causes them and we get caught up in the fallout. And James, what I think James is saying here is that we've got to check our motive. We got to check our motive. And when I start saying, I didn't sign up for this, when things in my household get a little bit chaotic and crazy, God comes back and he says, yeah, you stood in front of 100 people and made a vow to love, honor, and cherish in sickness and in health, till death do you part. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff I said. But he just reminds me of the sickness and the health part. Why? Because that's the battle I fight right now. And whenever that happens, the motivation, I have to go back and check my motive. What's my motive? It's uncomfortable. It's the pain. It's hard. I don't like it. I think it should be different. I can't control his behavior. If he would just, you heard me say it at the beginning, if he would just. Now, some of you in here are in really hard circumstances because you loved somebody who really hurt you. And sometimes our kids really hurt our feelings when they're 3 years old and they scream, "I hate you." My grandson, and I close with this story because this is really for me, the perfect example. A few months ago, it was hot. My son called me. I was taking care of my daughter's 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and 7-year-old while they went to a wedding. We were getting ready to go eat. And my son called me. He lives in Fresno. He goes, "Hey, Mom, can you meet me in Visalia in an hour and a half?" No, he calls me, not my husband, because he knows how big it is. And I said, "What do you need?" He goes, "Well, we got to go have dinner with a couple that are coming up from LA to bring us some stuff." He's a campus pastor for a church based in LA. And so his boss was coming and they were going to meet in Visalia so they could trade off some stuff and have dinner. And he goes, "I really don't want to take the kids and I really want Leanne to go with me. So will you come and just take the kids to dinner in Visalia and hang out for a couple of hours and then whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can be in Visalia in an hour." And so I told Tyson, Kinsley, and Henry, "Oh, we're gonna go to Visalia and have dinner." And I didn't tell them we were meeting the other 3 grandchildren who are at that time 6, 4, and 2. And so I was gonna have all 6 of them. And so I said to my husband, "You gotta go with me because I can't wrangle these kids by myself." So we drove and we got there and everybody's excited. So we parked in the parking lot of the restaurant, which is downtown, and there's a little hamburger joint. I'm like, "Hey, this is perfect, let's walk." And they're doing a car show. And by about masks at that time. So that was like one thing we didn't have to worry about. So we went and had hamburgers. We walked to the car show, but we're getting hot, we're getting tired. And 2 hours had now turned into 2.5 hours. So I put them in the van with the doors and windows open and I turned on a movie on the iPad, interestingly enough. And the 6-year-old, who thinks I'm the most important person on the planet, got thirsty. And the more thirsty he got, the meaner he got. And he finally started screaming at me. And he finally looked at me and I was like, "I don't have any water. I don't have any." "Well, you made me dinner." "Well, okay, I'm sorry." "Well, you need to fix it now. I'm sorry. I don't have any water." "Well, go buy some." There's nowhere to buy water. So I had a can of LaCroix water and an empty cup. So I pour the LaCroix water into the empty cup and I hand it to him. And as I'm handing it to him, he looks at me and he screams and he goes, literally screaming, he goes, "I can't." And I said, "Yeah, you did a very good job." And I handed him the cup of water and he took a sip and you'd have thought I was poisoning the child. He spit it out. He goes, "What?" And about that time, my son, who's 6'3", comes walking, very skinny, comes walking up. And as he's walking around the corner, CJ did not see him. CJ screams, he starts screaming at me, "You're trying to kill me." My son walks up and he goes, "Oh, what's going on here?" And I didn't say anything. And CJ screams from the car seat, "She's trying to kill me, Dad." And my son started laughing, and it took them 30 minutes of the drive home to convince them that I wasn't trying to kill him. So I called about an hour and a half later to check on the situation and see if I was going to be welcome in their home again. And my son started laughing, and so we were FaceTiming, and CJ was in the other room, and he heard me talking to my son on the phone. And he came running in and goes, "Is that Mel? I'm transferred to Mel. Let me tell you, blah, blah, blah." And he's like totally changed. So he's forgotten that I tried to kill him like an hour before. But think about this. He was waging a war because of his own selfish motive. How many times do we do that? I hate that. I have to like check my motives all the time. So as we go into our discussion times, I want you to talk about these questions and I want you to say, how do we determine if we're at war or if we're just throwing a fit? I'm really good at throwing fits. I can throw a fit with a test. You're a 3-year-old and I could probably really, but we can probably throw fits. It would be fun to have a test sometime. Who can throw a test? Yeah. Anybody in here think they can throw a fit? Oh, yeah. Yeah, these are the honest. The ones not raising their hand for denial. Or here. No, really, we all throw fits, don't we? Don't we all throw fits when things don't go the way we want? And don't we act like CJ acted with me, with God sometimes? Really, God, you're trying to kill me? Really, God, you're trying to kill me? And then I cut the dungeon down and say, well, no, I was trying to kill you. There would be no doubt. I lied and I laugh about it. Why? Because it's just too dang painful. So I hope that you enjoy your time in discussion. There's about 15 minutes of time and then Steph will come up and close it out. And this next week, I love this next week because week 4, we're focusing in on why are we still so surprised when God shows up? So enjoy your discussion time.